Baseball. It's been America's pastime since 1869 when it was invented, home of the longest standing professional league in the MLB. Baseball has brought so many memories to people all over the world and is a staple to just summer vacations. While baseball has brought so much joy, it catches a lot of flack from people that don't play the game. They say baseball aren't athletes. Who cares who watches baseball? And they still say baseball is the most boring sport ever. Most importantly, people who haven't played this game, they don't understand how hard it is. They'll sit there and they'll say baseball is easy. Well, I'm here to argue that it's not easy, that pitching is one of the most difficult things ever, and we're going to really look into today is how hard is pitching. So we're going to find out how many mets it takes to throw one pitch 97 miles an hour. And so in order to do that, we got to find out how much kinetic energy is used to throw the ball 97 miles per hour. This is measured in joules, which is pretty similar to the amount of calories burned, not the exact same, but pretty close. So we put this into the conversion chart equation to find out how much kinetic energy is used. 1/2 of the mass of the object, 0.145 kilograms of the baseball. 43.36 meters per second is converted from 97 miles per hour, and we're going to use this to find out that it takes 136.32 joules to produce the kinetic energy to throw the ball 97 miles per hour. So now we take that and we put it into power, which is the amount of watts. So we do work divided by time, and this is going to be the 136.32 that we found earlier, and that's going to be divided by roughly 0.4. That's about the amount of time it takes to throw the ball to the pitching mound at 90 miles per hour, a little less for 97. And this is going to find to be 340.8 watts in order to throw the ball. So now this is where we can really begin. And you see that there's 150 watts in a TV and almost halfway to how much 1 horsepower is for the amount of watts. And from the Suzuki motorcycle line, 360 is actually the peak amount of watts that motorcycle right there produces. So 1 watt equals 1 joule per second, and that's going to be 0.0143. We're going to convert pounds to kilograms to match up with the metric system. This is going to be 225 divided by 2.2, and we're going to get 102.27 kilograms. We're going to take the watts that we found earlier, and we're going to times that by the 1 joule per second, and this is going to get us 4.87 kcals per minute. So now we're going to take that 4.87 kcals, and we're going to wind up turning this into oxygen pretty soon. Yep, right here. 5.05 kcals per liter of oxygen. And this is going to find 0.96 litres of oxygen per minute, which is very, very small unit. So now we have to multiply this by 1,000 milliliters for conversion, and this is actually going to get us 960 milliliters per minute. That's a little bit more familiar with what we know. And so now we're going to take this and we're going to divide that by kilograms. This is going to start getting us closer to mets, and we're going to find it takes 9.39 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram times minute to throw the baseball, and this is finally where we get converted to a met. We take the 9.39 and we're going to divide this by 3.5 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute, which is 1 met, and then from that conversion we find that it takes 2.68 mets to throw the baseball 97 miles per hour. So you might be asking, so what does all that even mean? I threw a lot of information at you, and so to break it down as simple as possible, we have the Met chart and the Watt chart. Showed a little bit of a glimpse of this earlier, and we see from the Mets, this is a chart that trainers, physicians, rehab trainers as well, they'll all use this to kind of see what their client, how much tasking physical activity is for a client. And so we see right down here that 2.5 mets is which is walking 2 miles per hour, is pretty similar to what throwing 1 baseball pitch is. Well, I'm here to actually argue a little bit. It's a little bit misleading, because if you think about it, walking 2 miles per hour, that's a lot actually of oxygen usage. And we saw in the second half of the conversion chart that oxygen was a really big deal into that, and the amount of time that it takes from a baseball pitch to be thrown and how much force has to be produced in that short amount of time versus how much force is produced for just walking is completely different. And so you're going to use different energy systems. Baseball pitching is more similar to something like weightlifting, as you see down there, which is 6 mets. And so my argument here is baseball pitching, you're producing quite a bit of power right down here with the watts. We saw that one baseball pitch at 97 miles per hour is almost the exact same as a motorcycle at peak power, And so now if we come up here to weightlifting, 6 Mets, and weightlifting is considered, oh yeah, that's really strong. Oh yeah, that's an athletic thing to do because it's hard. Well, now I'm here to say a baseball pitch, which is producing pretty similar amounts of power, might be lower in Mets, but you got to be able to produce, you got to be able to pitch for much longer, which is why it's such a hard thing to do. No one's going into the weight room and they're going to be doing 100 reps of bench press, and that argument is valid because the pitching is using the same muscles over and over and over again. It's not do 20 reps of bench press, 20 reps of squat, 20 reps of this and this and this, where you can do 100 reps in the weight room and still be productive. No, it's the same muscle group over and over and over and over again. So now we have that perfect balance between a baseball pitch and weightlifting, and you're not able to lift weights for nearly as much when it produces more Mets, but you're able to pitch more. That's my argument to sit there and say that a baseball pitcher that's able to pitch 90 to 120 pitches per game, man, that's a lot. And that shows that they are quite the athletes. And it's really impressive. How I was not blessed. A sad story. So for tonight's matchup, you'll see that you have me going against my own brother, my own blood, my own kinfolk, Brandon Birdsell. A little bit of the differences we have here is you got 3-inch height difference with about a 15-pound difference. By my rough estimations, we're looking about 6 to 7% body fat percentage difference between the two. Put a couple of our stats here. As you see, I haven't my last season I pitched was about 10U Little League Baseball, and I went 2/3 of an inning, 17.89 ERA. Not my best work. Where Brandon pitched for San Jacinto Community College last year, a top 10 baseball JUCO baseball program in the country. He was able to put up a 2.54 ERA. Our most recent accomplishments is I'm a 4-time intramural softball veteran, and he is a Texas Tech commit. So now we have right here is you see me pitch for about 0.515 seconds it takes for me to get from the mound to the plate with the ball, and we're able to track this into miles per hour by doing a velocity equation, and we're able to come out to 117.67 feet per second. By running this through the rest of the conversion over, we're able to find it at 80 miles per hour. We see Brandon come here for the pitch, and he winds up, and he is able to reach the plate at 0.426 seconds, covering 142.25 feet per second. And by converting that over to miles per hour, we're able to see he tops out at 96.99 miles per hour. Might be asking, he's like, well, Dylan, how is that even possible? Y'all are both genetically similar, based on the fact that you're brothers, so y'all should both be the same type of athlete. And you know what? I'm right there with you, man. Like I don't know what happened, and so decided to just continue to look forward into this. And so next thing we're gonna see is actually the biomechanical changes of what are different between me and Brandon and how we throw the ball. it doesn't take me long to already notice the difference between me and Brandon when it comes just to our stance leg and our stride leg. Our stance leg, you see I have 147 degrees of knee extension, while Brandon's sitting at a 161. Here you see Dr. Calabrasi highlight some of the weaknesses that can come from the stride leg and the lead leg that could impact force production and energy transfer. It talks about in the stance leg that you can have some weak hip flexors and internal rotators. As far as when it comes to loading the hips in the lead leg, he does talk about how a lot of the load is controlled through the hips, the glutes, piriformis, and other muscles right around that area. The fault of the stance leg could lead into the next component of the pitch, which is the stride phase. As we can see right here, the foot to contact is the most important part when it comes to the stride phase. You want to have your torso, your shoulder, and your pelvis all in sync with rotation. As you can see with me, first off, I'm sitting back on my heels, not able to support my weight very well compared to Brandon. And then you also see that my shoulders are turning a little bit early compared to where that front foot is hitting. You can see with that linear line straight down. This problem right here is called open shoulder. Whenever you move your shoulders and torso too quickly, then you're not able to produce enough force into the ground, and this causes a lot more stress and pressure onto your glenohumeral joint, which is also known as the shoulder joint. My oh my, we start to see a big difference here. Brandon's external rotation of his shoulder gets up to 136.5 degrees in the cocking stage, whereas mine's at 87.4. These changes are extremely important for developing kinetic energy, or potential energy, into kinetic energy. As the torso rotation starts to progress, elbow lag will start to happen behind the shoulder, and even more is you're going to get some more forearm lag, and this forearm lag is really what's going to be the lever that helps propel the baseball forward with spin and with velocity towards home plate. Dr. Oyama has a beautifully made chart right here that shows the different kinematics of pitching and what happens to the joints, and as you see right there in that second box up top, the maximum shoulder external rotation, and you start to see that elbow start to lag behind. Looking right here, forearm arm, yes, lags behind the arm, force production turns into external rotation. This is going to be the end of the the arm cocking phase and the start of the acceleration phase, and this is really going to bring us into what's next is elbow valgus movement, as you see right here. This is where a lot of that energy is going to be released from being stored into further and that really deals with how much that forearm is lagging behind the rest of the body, as energy is now transferred from the feet up through the torso and to the shoulder and eventually into the forearm from the elbow. Sticking with the acceleration phase, we're going to see that Brandon has much more elbow valgus angular torque here, as you can see that from his front picture with a little bit of the side-to-side movement, and also from that side picture you really get a good glimpse of just how much further back that arm's able to go back. This is important because as a lever, this increases the potential to create more energy to drive that ball and propel the ball forward. A few things that go into the acceleration phase is the fact that the torso is rotating with the pelvis and the hips. This causes the arm to lag behind. The lagging arm creates pressure in the elbow joint, and this will allow, like I said, for more potential to be going. Shoulder internal rotation creates elbow valgus and pronation of the arm, which will be a part of the finishing phase of the acceleration phase. And external rotation, we saw that in the last slide, as he had much higher levels of external shoulder rotation than I did. Mr. Aguinaldo and Dr. Chambers show a great research paper about how elbow valgus and different biomechanical aspects go into predicting how much elbow valgus torque is going on. Right here they show that the moment that the trunk's axis of rotation could arguably be greater than the moment about the humeral long axis produced by a more flexed elbow, owing to higher segmental moments of inertia and the level arm away from the trunk. So we talked about right here is we saw Brandon had much higher elbow flexion than I did, and this is able to create that axis, create that lever to be able to have more power behind the arm. And the valgus torques were reduced with shorter lever arms away from the rotating trunk, and a more flexed elbow were increased with longer lever arms. Yeah, right there. They go and they argue a couple other things, and they say that greater segmental moments of inertia would equate to higher joint torques. So essentially just being able to this is where the biomechanical aspect comes in, of just how you have your body located changes these factors and is able to change the outcome, or something that's so simple as where your elbow is positioned underneath the ball or behind the ball or in front of the ball. Down here they also argued that, in conclusion, biomechanical predictors of valgus extension torque of the elbow have been described. A condition of late trunk rotation, reduced shoulder external rotation, and increased elbow flexion appear to be associated with elbow valgus torque. Right here, we've already pointed out that Brandon had 2 of the 3 things associated to be able to produce more of angular force at that elbow compared to me. The only thing that they're arguing here is that you would be able to produce or put more torque into the elbow if you were to develop a sidearm pitch instead of a 3/4 over the top pitch, as you see right here. So going back to Oyama's paper, they really argue about the balance between performance and injury prevention. The other paper we were just reading was all about how can you get more valgus pressure onto the elbow to produce more force. Well, ultimately there is a balance to all of this, and Oyama really does a good job of explaining the differences of the two. They'll go into right here, they'll say, while the sequential segment rotation and distal segment lag is necessary for effective pitching performance, it also places the joints in a vulnerable position for injuries. The lagging of the segments can force the proximal joints to move beyond the normal ranges of motion. So yeah, we already saw this a little bit with external rotation winds up going much higher. Elbow valgus movement winds up going a little bit higher. Right here, we actually see a correlation between the two. It says excessive shoulder external rotation can also result in high valgus moments at the elbow. We saw that the last paper actually argued something a little bit different, where they said less external rotation winds up creating more pressure at the elbow. I believe that there's truth to both. And this says the valgus movement creates tensile stress on the medial elbow structures, compressive to stress the lateral joint structures, and a combination of compression and shear stress on the posterior medial elbow. And this is known as the Ucl sprain, or if you wind up having the tear, it's known as Tommy John surgery. Brandon actually had Tommy John surgery in high school. And he's had to change up his routine quite a bit. As we can see right here, adaptive thickening of the UCL reported in high school pitchers to exhibit high elbow valgus loading during pitching. Going back to a little bit earlier, what my problem was with that open shoulder, with where that shoulder was opening before the foot stepped on the ground. A lot of high school pitchers actually wind up having this problem. I can't speak specifically on Brandon if he had this problem or not. I'm gonna have to go back and watch really early film of him. But this just talks about how there is a balance between the two, and it's all about finding the proper balance for pitching long term. Here we get into the final phase of the throwing motion, the deceleration phase. The first thing I want to point out though is talk about one of the very first factors that come up on this slide that show a difference between how much velocity Brain is able to produce compared to me is how much force he's able to get into that back leg. And you can see the visible difference right here where he has much more knee extension in that back leg compared to me and more internal rotation. By having that, he's able to get a longer stride. With the longer stride, he gets his hips lower to the ground and loaded. While having more loaded hips, it's only natural that he's going to have more knee flexion on contact time in that front leg compared to me. So that's also been proven to have more velocity. Second thing is you can see where his shoulder is when he's releasing the ball compared to mine. His shoulder is mid of the foot, almost out in front of the toe, whereas mine's back on my heel. This shows a correlation between where his torso lean is happening compared to where he's releasing the ball. This is also known to be increasing velocity as torso rotations actually been proven to show up as much as 50% of kinetic energy in this pitching motion. The last thing you'll see is how much knee extension he's getting on that front foot, and he's getting a little bit more than mine, but the argument here is, even though it's not that big of a difference, the argument is everything else he's doing with the more loading of the hips, with more force being pushed in a horizontal plane compared to me, is much more stress is being put on that front knee to be able to stop his momentum, which is has also led to higher correlations of velocity in the baseball pitch. The last thing I didn't really get a chance to analyze, but is the biceps roll in the deceleration phase of a pitch. The biceps are known to have quite a bit of stress when it comes to both intersections at the elbow and at the shoulder, as the biceps is to try to stop all the forward momentum of the arm in less than half a second. So I'm going to leave you with this. As we saw, there's quite a bit of differences between me and Brandon, and some of the main ones are you're going to see quite more elbow valgus tension and torque. You'll see some more shoulder external rotation, the ability for his synchronized timing of his entire body with his lower half to throw the ball was much higher than mine. And there's a few other things that could be going to play. You can see some cross-sectional area. You can see just training to be able to have that muscle-to-mind connection. And while yes, there are those external variables and just the training aspect, as Brandon's been doing this his whole life, as I haven't played baseball in roughly 8 to 9 years, this was very interesting just to see how different people coming from the same bloodline can look completely different when doing a simple task. Well, I say simple, but as we learned, it's very taxing on the body, but a task such as throwing a baseball. But that's going to be it for me. I'm going to close you guys out here at if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. This was really fun to break down the difference between me and my brother. And lastly but not least, go Stros.